Hi, look at those dots behind me. Weird, huh? Hi, Mandy. Mandy, I saw your little thing, your thing on the chat in YouTube, and I could tell you privately sometime who it is, or you might be able to guess, you know. But I saw that, but I didn't want to. Oh, I see Dr. Lyle is here already. Yay. Let me find him.
Cool hair, AJ.
Okay, I'm looking for
Simple
you.
style.
You're there. You are in the blue shirt. Spotlight for everyone. Perfect. Well, we're right on time. You look nice, Dr. Lyle. It must be cold where you are because you're wearing a sweater.
Cool. You got it.
I bet. Okay. All right. Here we go, everyone. Welcome to our favorite Wednesday of the month with Dr. Lyle. Please do consider submitting your questions in advance because they stay on my phone and it's the easiest for me to save and archive. And so the first question is from Erin. And she says, thanks to Chef AJ, I've successfully lost 20 pounds and have kept it off for 8 months. Congratulations. Big hug to you, AJ. I feel great. I was able to reduce thyroid meds. Over the holidays, my focus started to waver, but I am back on track. How does one keep a focused, motivated attitude in maintenance and not sabotage self? I've been successful in maintenance before, but I also was not eating so much delicious food before either. Thank you.
Well, I think that perhaps there's one sort of psychological thing that needs to be done, and then one physical thing that needs to be done. So the physical thing that needs to be done is we need to continue to essentially have orderly habits that we're doing. So in other words, we keep shopping, we keep the refrigerator clean, we have a routine, we stay with our routine that has been successful. So that's the physical thing. We keep junky food out of the house, etc. So that's number one. The second thing that we do though is to be alert to something that's important when it comes to the sort of subtle mechanisms of the way our mind works. And the key feature of continued success in something like this has to do with being sensitive to what I call the self-esteem mechanism. So the self-esteem mechanism is, so I wish I had a better term or a different term that wasn't so confusing. So let me define my terms so that you understand what I'm talking about. Most people consider self-esteem to be the same thing as confidence, and I do not. I see confidence as confidence, and I see self-esteem as self-esteem, and they're two entirely different things. So to me, self-esteem is literally the self esteeming itself. Okay, that is different than confidence. Confidence is something that comes from our ability to compete in various markets, whether it be romance, whether it be trade, or whether it be friendship. Okay, the three major markets or competitive processes of life. We don't always think of them as competitive, but they are. In other words, so if you get a job, that means somebody else didn't get that job. You outcompeted them. Okay, if you tried to get a job and didn't get that job, somebody else got that job, so you lost that competitive process. So your feelings have to do with whether or not we are getting positive feedback or positive or victory signals in effect, or we're getting defeat signals, rejection signals, etc. So this gets a lot of these things aren't permanent. Like you can have a friendship that's kind of a little bit on the outs right now behind some conflict. So you can feel not too good. You can feel a little bit angry and slightly depressed and a little bit guilty. I don't know, even if you didn't do anything wrong. Those would be normal feelings between a couple of people that are having a conflict and they're kind of pulled away from each other a little bit, okay? That the feelings that you're having are the result of esteem processes, not self-esteem processes. Those are different things. So self-esteem, so in other words, most of your feelings and your most intense feelings come from what I'm going to call esteem. In other words, In a couple of weeks we'll have the Super Bowl, and it's going to be agonizing for one group of people, okay, i.e. the fans and the players of the side that loses. They're not going to end it in a draw. Not going to do that. Everybody's not going to go home with half a trophy. So somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And the people that win are going to be very happy with the fact that they won. And the people that lose are going to be very unhappy about the fact that they lost. Those are esteem processes. In other words, the world will forever recognize them as, oh, you were the champion, or, oh, you guys got beat and blew it. Okay. So that is the mood states that are coming out of there are esteem processes. Your confidence has to do with how well you feel like you are able to stand up to the competitive process. So both of those teams probably feel quite confident because they know they're very, very good. They know they have a very reasonable chance of winning. Nobody is so confident that they're relaxing and drinking beer these next week and a half and not practicing. In other words, they're not so confident that they're so much better that all they got to do is show up. Okay. So you can imagine how exciting it is. I hate to be talking sports, but Jen Hawk would be just slap me right now to be using sport. But let's suppose that your team is up by 4 touchdowns going into the fourth quarter. You are very confident that you're going to win. So therefore, the confidence, it feels great to be super confident that you know that the competition is now down to 1 quarter of football. The odds of us losing a 28-point lead are basically close to 0. So the confidence is supreme. On the other side, they're very depressed and unconfident. They feel like there's no way that they can succeed. Those have nothing to do with self-esteem. Okay. You can imagine a player in that game on the losing team that has played as hard as he can. He has prepared as well as he can prepare. And when he's getting beaten, he looks at the situation and says, well, I just got outplayed. Okay, I did everything that I could do. Okay, there wasn't anything else that I could have done. That is self-esteem. Self-esteem is its own type of peace of mind. It's an internal signal that says you've done an excellent job. Okay, no matter what happens in the world, if you're an artist, your job is to paint the best painting that you can paint. When you take it out to the show and nobody buys it and the critics, give their thumbs down, oh well. The truth is, it doesn't feel good to get negative esteem signals from the outside world. But to me, the most important thing is, what did your internal audience say about it? If the internal audience said, you know what, I did the best I could. That's as good as I can do. That's fine. And now, you might say, hey, it's still miserable because I'm getting a bunch of negative feedback. Well, guess what, folks? We can't control the feedback from the outside world. So in this life, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some, and there's nothing you can do about that. You can give it your very best art and fail. Many movie directors and movie producers poured their heart and soul into a project that they believed was going to be massively successful because they loved it, and it flopped. In fact, that usually happens, okay? And then surprisingly, sometimes they'll do some throwaway movie that they think is nothing, and that's the big hit. By the way, the Star Wars was an afterthought on a tag end of a big major business deal involving other films. It was nothing. It was a throwaway deal. And that's what Star Wars, they had no expectation that thing would make a nickel. All right. So we don't know what the real world is going to do and think about our competitive process. We don't know. All we can do is we can prepare and do a good job. We can invest our effort in doing a good job. And the feeling that we get on the inside from making that investment is a feeling of moral rightness. It's a feeling that says, you've done a good job, okay? Whatever happens, happens, but you did your job, okay? So that is self-esteem. And it's useful for people to know that that's where that feeling comes from, to actually conceptually identify that that is precisely where that feeling comes from. Notice that everybody is consciously directed at esteem. They're not consciously directed at self-esteem. Self-esteem was never supposed to be a conscious goal of this nervous system. Esteem was the goal of the nervous system. Esteem is where people are either your friends or they are not. They either select you as a mate or they don't, and they either trade with you or they don't. Esteem, how much people value what you have to offer, that's what drives the most intensity of human feeling, easily. Okay. The self-esteem was just meant to be a guidance system quietly operating in the background, like the Wizard of Oz, quietly directing you to try to get you to do a good job relative to your latent abilities. Okay, that's what it's there for. And it's going to sound an alarm when you don't do it. And that alarm is self-disgust. Okay, there's a feeling, a really loud signal that you really blew it. Why did you screw that up so badly? And it wasn't the performance that was so bad, it was your preparation. That's what it was. Of course, there are moments of crisis when you prepared really well and then you did terrible in a performance. It's like, what happened? It's like, I don't know. I got more to learn about integrating practice with performance because something fell apart there. Okay, but it usually doesn't. There's sort of an 80% rule. But if you prepare very well at something, it's going to go 80% right. Probably not going to go 90% right. That's lucky. It probably won't go 70% right. That would be bad luck that day. So that's the idea. So if you're a wedding planner, you can expect that it'll go about 80% right if you plan really hard. A lot of problems. There's going to be problems. You don't know where they're going to come from. All you can do is plan your best. But what I want people to recognize is an unappreciated event, psychologically and emotionally. And the reason why I want to draw my attention to it is if you know that it's there and how it works very specifically, then you can make it a goal, okay, which it usually is not the goal. Okay, you can actually consciously realize, okay, I know that I'm after this goal out there to compete in the world. I want to lose 15 pounds or something. Okay. I know that that would feel really good. I would feel so much more confident about my ability to compete next summer when people are on the beach. Okay. That's so I know I want that and I want to have the feeling of that positive feedback. But here's what I want the person to focus on. We know that goal is out there, but you cannot quote achieve a goal. That isn't how life works. What you can achieve are sub goals. Every major goal is actually an integrated set of sub goals. You can't say to yourself, well, that's it. Today's the day I'm going to lose that 15 pounds. No, today is not the day you're going to lose that 15 pounds. Not unless you're going to a liposuction surgeon and you're going to take yourself to the brink of death. Maybe, okay? But the point is that no, you're not going to do that in a day. You're going to do that in 180 days. It will be 180 days is what that's going to take. So your job can't be to lose 15 pounds. Your job is to lose 1.5 ounces. And we do that today, and then we're going to do it tomorrow. And so what we need to focus on is our job is nothing other than managing the sub goals that are in front of us today. And when we do the sub goals, we're going to notice something if we're paying attention. We're going to notice a very subtle feeling of self-respect that we call self-esteem. It's going to be like, hey, good for me. I did a good job. Okay. And we'll notice that if you don't do it, there will be a very slight feeling of disgust. So if you go ahead and get into your kid's ice cream and have a big scoop of it, you will get the little pleasure trap hit from it. But afterwards and during, you'll be feeling slightly self-disgusted. Now, will you be ready to jump off a bridge and end your life behind it? Of course not. Okay. It's not out there to destroy you. It's out there to warn you. This is one of my chief complaints with the general analysis that comes out of cognitive therapy. So cognitive therapy considers this kind of internal criticism to be unnecessary, a human flaw, and a curse of humanity. I believe that they do not actually understand what is happening. Okay, they're not really very sophisticated theoretically. I know I was a significant research person in the field. I was trained deeply in the field. I've lectured in the field. I've published in the field. I know how cognitive therapists think at the highest level, and I know how it is that the rank and file are trained, and I know what it is that they're thinking. And when they hear self-criticism out of people, they consider that to be the curse that they're going to try to talk you out of. I don't. I do not. I listen to the self-criticisms out of anybody, and I understand that there is truth in the self-criticism. Okay? And the truth, that self-criticism may be on particularly loud. That person may have a particularly nasty internal audience. In other words, a very high perfectionistic creature may live in there. It's akin to the neural tissue and personality of the rest of the person's mind. So it's never a mystery to me when someone has a very, very critical and essentially very exacting and demanding internal audience. Not a shock. The rest of the person's personality is that way. Okay? It's the same genes that built all of these systems. So, however, the criticism that the person is generating, that they are essentially hearing from their internal audience, has validity. And what we have to do is we have to honor the fact that we are getting criticized. It's just like constructive criticism from, say, a good English teacher in the 11th grade when you write an essay. And you may have done quite a good job, but the English teacher is saying, yeah, well, let me explain, there's room for improvement. Okay? So usually there's quite a bit of room for improvement. Most people do not have a very, very punitive or very critical internal audience. They have a reasonable internal audience. And when they do a mediocre job, the reasonable internal audience says, you're doing a mediocre job. So believe me, it's a tough situation because the pleasure trap drags people into the pleasure trap, unnaturally. But the prices you pay are real. You pay prices in your social self-confidence behind this and your frustration with yourself that you aren't doing a very good job. And then the internal audience is criticizing you all fairly. In other words, it doesn't know what you're facing in terms of the pleasure trap, but it sees what you're doing and it's not impressed. Okay, so that you can understand why in situations like this, why cognitive therapy would be in way over its head. It's not understanding these dynamics. It's not understanding the biological purpose of the criticism. That's the biggest thing those concepts in therapy are missing. There is tremendous, just as there's biological significance if you have a fever, there's biological significance if you have nausea, and there's biological significance if you have anxiety. There's biological significance for self-loathing. Okay, it's there for a reason. It's an internal audience saying, hey, this is mediocre. You are wrecking our chances to compete out there in those domains by what it is that you're doing. Okay. And yes, it feels awful, but don't blame the messenger. Now, so the answer to the question is, this is why this is all I've been chirping about for 10 years, pretty much. Anybody asks me anything, I try to weave it back and explain esteem processes. Okay, because this is the heart and soul of the human life experience, is esteem processes. I mean, you can look at a pretty sunset all by yourself and maybe you'll like that a little bit. You can eat a chunk of pineapple all by yourself and maybe you'll like that. But notice how much of your emotional life has to do with signals that happen between you and another conscious entity. A conscious entity is usually humans, but sometimes it's pets. Okay. I can't help it. If you give me a mechanical cat, I don't think it's going to do much for me because the little signals that it will make will not be from a conscious entity that is actually signaling its esteem for me. But when my cats signal esteem for me, it's unbelievably endearing. Okay, so esteem processes lie at the root of the human enterprise. So what is the secret? The closest thing that there is for you to get conscious and sensitive and aware of the things that cause your self-esteem to go up and down. And it's when you get out of line, don't remember that self-esteem mechanism is not meant to be brutally punishing. It's meant to be like a vague, unpleasant, dull, emotional ache. That's what it's meant to be. It's not supposed to be loud. What's supposed to be loud is where the rubber really hits the road in our ability to compete and feedback from other people. That's louder. Okay. I had a woman that desperately wanted to lose weight, desperately wanted to lose weight. Okay. And she had some events coming up in her life that she started out many, many months in advance, ready to attack it. And so we worked together, and for like 8 or 10 months, she worked diligently, lost, 40 pounds or so, and was able to be much more presentable. She was still overweight, but she was much more presentable for the big event that she had been aiming at. It was a big deal, a big life history, what do they call that? Life event. After that, she started going sideways. And she, as she started to gain weight, she still kept getting compliments from other people. And she really liked those compliments. In other words, other people hadn't seen her in a while, then they see her and they say, hey, you look great. And the truth is, she looked greater, 2 months ago after the big life event. And now the wheels have come off and she's 10 pounds heavier, but she still looks a lot better than she looked a year ago, which is the last time those people saw her. That esteem kept making her life very tolerable. It's like, hey, every now and then I'm getting these great compliments. Meanwhile, quietly and like a termites, digging away at the foundation of her happiness, the self-esteem mechanism was telling her, hey, you're screwing up. Hey, you're screwing up. And she would talk to me and she'd be like, I'm disgusted, but I feel pretty good. It's like, yeah, you need to start paying attention to the quiet internal voice. It's not that loud, but it's not leaving either. No amount of compliments from the outside, no matter what anybody says about your great art or your great body or the great thing that you did, if you know that that you've been doing a lousy job, you don't feel that good about yourself. You just don't. Self-esteem is the foundation of happiness. Can you build more on top of it? Yes. Is the foundation sometimes not enough to secure your life experience? Of course not. We were meant to be in pain when we lose something important. So self-esteem is not enough, but it's the foundation. And even if you lose badly, if your self-esteem is intact, like, I did the best I could. I'm surprised, I'm disappointed like crazy that I was defeated. I should have been able to get that job. I really thought I was going to be able to ask out Susie. I thought I was getting a bunch of positive signals. I did everything right. And she went with Brett to the prom instead of me. Are you going to be disappointed? Yes, but you did everything right. So this is an unbelievably long-winded answer, but I think you can see how passionate I am about this, because I feel like it's the core to the answer to a question that I've answered 1,000 times. How do I keep on track? What's to motivate me? Well, I'll tell you what's to motivate you. If you lose out there in the environment by screwing up long enough, you'll finally get back to the same motivation that got you started in the first place, i.e. the total lack of success at what you wanted to accomplish with respect to esteem from other people. Fair enough. We don't want to wait that long. Okay. What we want to do is we want to be doing a good job working towards keeping or maintaining or achieving those successes. Meanwhile, what we want to do is be paying very close attention to the self-esteem mechanism. There's another side to this that's super important. And that is for those of you that may be here that are stalled, doing a so-so job. Pleasure trap is a very tough problem. And there are people out there in our space that are 50, 75, 100 pounds overweight. And there's people that are very disgusted with themselves, that they are 75 or 100 pounds overweight or 50 pounds overweight or 40 pounds overweight, whatever it is. They're very disgusted with themselves. Okay. However, you may believe that you're going to have to lose 40 pounds before you're not disgusted with yourself. because you're imagining that what will take to make your happiness much better is positive feedback from other people, and you're wrong. Okay? That is not true. What is important, what you don't realize, it's the self-esteem that is the foundation of all of it. And therefore, literally in 10 days, most people can have a very significant leap of their self-esteem. In 10 days, you're only going to lose a pound of fat, maybe 2, but probably not. So it can't be the 1.5 pounds of fat that we lose in 10 days that makes such an enormous difference psychologically, and it isn't. What it is the self-esteem mechanism. If you do an outstanding job in the next 12 days, 10 days, the self-esteem mechanism watches that and starts getting really impressed and signals very strong respect to you. Okay? Your brain effectively has a couple of different entities in it. This self-esteem mechanism, i.e. an internal audience that is not you. It's your virtual reality program of other people watching you. And it's that mechanism and you. Okay? And in the same way, when real live other people give us positive feedback for things that we do well and we feel great about it, the same thing is true when the internal audience gives us positive feedback about what we did. Okay? That internal audience can also give us very negative feedback about what we did, but here's what it won't do. It won't give you negative feedback when you work very hard and do a good job and don't get very good results. It'll be frustrated. It'll be angry at the unfairness of the outcomes, but it will not be disturbed with yourself. That will not happen. Okay? So the secret trick is the closest thing I know. It's the ultimate of not a trick. And that is that the self-esteem that you get, that you have on any given hour of your life, is the self-esteem that you have earned. And it's not something that is chiseled from your early childhood experiences. They have absolutely nothing to do with it. This has everything to do with essentially how well rested you are. So how well rested you are, it has nothing to do with how well you slept as a child. It has to do with how much sleep have you got in the last 2 or 3 or 4 nights. That's what causes that to happen. The same thing is true with your self-esteem. And notice the tremendous difference between that and self-confidence. So self-confidence can be much more consistent because somebody that knows that they're really good at something knows, whether I practice that hard today or not, I know that I'm going to be able to sit down at a piano and play really, really well. Okay, I may not be as sharp as I usually am, but believe me, I'm good enough to wow the lunch crowd at the hotel. Okay, because I'm really good. Okay. So that's self-confidence. It's not the same thing as self-esteem. That guy who's been on a drunken bender for the last 4 days, smoking a bunch of cigarettes, and has not been paying attention to his craft, and does not have high self-esteem, but when he steps in front of the piano in front of the brunch crowd, he knows he's fine. That's self-confidence. It's a different thing. So I hope that distinction makes sense, and I hope that I have made the point as to how important it is and useful it is to understand specifically the self-esteem mechanism, because you can turn around your feelings of self-loathing or self-disgust or self-mediocrity in very short order. It does not take long. Okay, so it may be a 1 year or 2 year journey to lose all the weight that you want to, but it's a 10-day journey to the low-grade excitement, growing sense of excitement and pride that comes from doing it well. And you can only have that pride if you earn it. And it's useful to know that it is like a pitiless system, that it will in fact happen. You can't stop it from happening if you do a good job. All right, AJ, that's enough of a mouthful.
Okay, thank you. Jerry says, oh my gosh, how does Dr. Lisle look into my soul? Nice. This is from Sheila. Why do people like me sabotage themselves? For me, I struggle with a timekeeping task task at work. I have to bill my time in tenths of an hour, but even though I know that I need to do it, I don't. It's a big issue. It seems the same principle would apply to bad eating. We know certain foods are harmful, but we eat them anyway. It seems like self-sabotage or maybe a lack of discipline. I think if I could understand the underlying issue, I could overcome it.
Now, there's too many possibilities there to know. So it must be an attorney, somebody like that bills in such small increments. That's kind of people that are faced with that. The all behavior jostles down to cost benefit analysis. So if you're actually wanting to get to the root of any of these questions, they're all cost benefit analytic. And so I just described one reason why it's very difficult to stay on a healthy track is that the pleasure trap is pushing against you making good decisions, because the pleasure trap is telling you that the right decision is the richest, most exciting decision. So it's very difficult to go against the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap is an unnatural problem. Okay, so however, if you know that you are getting suckered into the pleasure trap, your self-assessment mechanism, self-esteem mechanism knows that you are. Okay, you are aware about what would be the wiser thing to do, and so you're going to get disgusted when you don't. Okay, so that's going to happen. But why would we do it if we know that? And the answer is cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so that's why I made the big pitch in the last half an hour, because the solution to the problem is understanding that the feelings that we have of the kind of self-loathing, self-disgust feelings, those have a direct cause. Okay, and that direct cause, if we can possibly then engineer that causality into our cost benefit analysis, and that we can possibly change the cost benefit analysis. You cannot change a pattern of behavior without new information. Your mind is coming to the conclusions that it's coming to. You fiddle around with the billing thing, and the reason is you haven't been punished enough for it. If they told you, whatever your name is, Sarah, if they said, well, Sarah, if you don't do it every 6 minutes, then you're fired, and we will start today. And we will be watching on the computerized system. We have somebody back there in the back that's watching everybody's entries. And the first time that your entry is not in after the 6 minutes, we'll just walk in and we'll fire you. Well, guess what? You do it, right? They wouldn't have a gun to your head. They wouldn't be taking out a hammer and slamming your fingers. They wouldn't be doing anything of the kind. They wouldn't be screaming at you. All they would do is we'd tell you, no problem. If you don't do it, you're done. And you can go, we can see whether or not you want to flake out on that, okay? And maybe if you're really flaky, you may have to find out that 4 of your colleagues get fired that morning. And then it's like, holy smokes, really? They're really doing this? Oh my God, I'm going to do it. Because I'd rather do that than start looking for a job. Unless it turns out that your aunt just left you a bunch of money and you felt like you needed a big break anyway, and you're pretty confident you get a job somewhere down the road, at which point you just may continue to flake out until they knock on your door and tell you you're fired. And you're like, okay, well, sorry about that. And off you go. But if you need the job, if the job's super important and you don't want to go through the upsetting hassle of getting a new job, then I guarantee you I could get you to fill in that thing every 6 minutes. All I'd have to tell you is, oh, you're definitely going to be fired. It's not even a question. There won't even be a discussion. It's done. Okay. So you say, well, okay, I recognize that that's true. All right. What principle is being identified by that thought experiment? And what it is cost benefit analysis. Okay. So you realize, okay, the reason I'm doing it is for cost benefit analysis. So it turns out that whatever feedback that you get and whatever snarling that you get or little penalties that you get for not doing that thing at work, it's just not worth it. You're trying to skate around it because it doesn't feel reasonable to you. And it just feels like it's too much hassle. You feel like, well, the real work I do is the work that I do, not this cataloging of the work. And it just doesn't add up in your consciousness that this is a fair and reasonable way to behave. It is. It's the law places and other places do that kind of thing because they've worked very hard to figure out what's the best way for them to make money. Best way for them to make money is keep that brain of yours on task for 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and then you get a 30-second break to catalog it. Otherwise, you're wandering off into the weeds, okay? So however it is what it is. But your brain is looking at all the cost benefits of fiddling around with that, and you fiddle. It's understandable. I'd probably do the same thing until I got threatened enough. Now, the second part, though, has to do with the food. So why do I wander off the food path? Well, very simple. Pleasure Trap is telling you that, it's incentivizing you. It's not actually sending you a message. I'm telling you, it's sending you an evolutionary message, but it sends evolutionary messages through feelings. So the feelings tell us it's absolutely the right thing to do to eat the bonbons or the Cinnabon. Are you kidding? Of course it's the right thing to do. Every single ancestor that you ever had would tell you that it's obviously the right thing to do. You are the only one of your genetic line going back 1 billion years that says, no, that's a mistake. Well, you can imagine what kind of cognitive dissonance that has. And you can see why it is that almost anybody that ever tries this is going to fail, because it's going to take unusual personalities with unusual motivation to stand up to 1 million of your ancestors whispering in your ear, telling you the right thing to do is to eat the Cinnabon. Okay? The right thing to do to make you sexier, live longer, and feel better is to eat the richest food in our environment, for goodness sakes. Don't do something stupid like eat the less dense food. That will make you skinny and weak and dead, and that will be the end of us. So of course, eat the richest food. And it tells you that not in English, it tells you that in motivation and emotion and sensation. It gives you signals as to how to feel, and it feels the excitement of the richer food. That's why. So it's a cost benefit analysis that's being run by your nervous system, and it's leaning in the way of the pleasure trap. How do we lean against it? Well, you could try all kinds of things that don't work. You can walk down a cardiac unit in a local hospital and see all the people dying, and you can say, well, that's going to happen to me. Yeah, you won't believe it. You'll walk right out to your car, hop in your car. You don't feel any chest pain. Don't believe it. Okay, I'll worry about that later. It's not going to do it for most people. Some people, a few people, it will be the physical pain, the nausea or not feeling very good physically. That's useful. So people with ulcerative colitis do a better job than normal people on this program. However, for most of us, we're not doing enough physical suffering. The suffering we're doing is psychological. And the suffering that is happening as a result of, for the most obvious thing is excess weight, that therefore lowers the esteem signals we get from our environment. The problem is that if we act on it today, one little tiny bit, what difference does it make? So the cost benefit analysis staring us in the face today is the obvious evidence from our nervous system that this is obviously the right thing to do, is to eat the rich food, versus a four-brain bundle that says, wait a second, we're supposed to take a tiny step in the other direction. And the cost benefit says, what's the difference? It's not going to make any difference in our appearance today or this week. Who cares? Wait a second, let's think again what our sensations are telling us. And it tells us go right into the pleasure trap. So now we get back to the beginning. How are we going to beat this thing? We're going to beat it either because we have unusual motivation and we have an unusual personality, and we say, I'm going to beat this problem. I'm sick of these negative esteem signals, and I am going to get out of this trap. Okay, there's people that can do that. But there's probably some additional people that if we teach them and they understand about how their mind works, that it may alter the cost-benefit analysis that their mind is running. And that's what this whole previous discussion was about. That you are self-sabotaging, but you are doing so in a way that it's because of an illusion. So the illusion is that when you do the wrong thing, it feels right, and therefore it must have been the right thing. Now, we know it's wrong, but our Stone Age brain doesn't know it's wrong. But if you do the right thing, the Stone Age brain will be mildly frustrated because it knows that there's richer food in the environment, but your internal audience will know you did the right thing, and your self-esteem will be stoked. In other words, you will get a nod and a smile from the self-esteem mechanism, knowing that that is what the big short-term payoff is. Big short-term payoff isn't that you're going to feel so much better physically. It's not that much the difference. It's not going to be that you're going to be 10 pounds lighter and therefore more attractive. That's not going to happen today. The only thing that's going to happen today is that if you do a good job, if you watch carefully, you'll watch the self-esteem mechanism give you a little nod of pride. That's what it will do. I want you to see that, be aware of it, watch it, experiment with it. Doesn't mean that today is the day that you do everything right forever. You'll screw up. You'll get pushed around by the pleasure trap. You'll do things that were self-indulgent and not high conscientiousness. And when you do, watch that little mechanism come alive and tell you that that's what happened. Okay, it's fine. That happens to me every now and then. A little self-disgust reaction comes in from some way that I did something. And so that's what, that is the answer. You are self-sabotaging behind an illusion called the pleasure trap. And that will also undermine your happiness because your self-esteem mechanism will take a hit whenever that happens. Is what we want to do is we want to fight back with an understanding that there's a benefit to being more diligent about this, and that if we do that, we get to experience that peace of mind that comes with knowing that we did the right thing. That's all there is. Otherwise, it's a very tricky problem.
I think about that song, it can't be wrong when it feels so right.
Yes.
By Debbie Boone. Okay, thanks, Doc. Sharmini says, how do you develop the sense of being enough and overcome the fear of failure?
Well, let's talk about what the fear of failure is and the concept of being enough. Because what you're asking about is the concept of confidence. And confidence only makes any sense for almost all things in relationship to socially competitive goals. Okay, so being enough to whom, for what? Obviously, there's a socially competitive goal involved. Those questions don't make any sense to a Wolverine, all by themselves on a desert island somewhere. It doesn't make sense to a human being. It's on a desert island cut off from all of humanity, and they are simply, they're not, essentially combing their hair carefully and braiding it so it's going to look cool. They're not doing that. Okay, they are away from the process of those kinds of questions. So the kinds of questions of being enough has to do with competitive standing. And so it's going to turn out that human beings have a competitive mechanism. And that competitive mechanism basically says, if you hustle, you can go a little higher in the food chain. Okay, so the three grand competitive markets of human life, which are romance, friendship, and trade, these are all competitive. You must compete for the people on the other side of these exchanges. There's another important domain of human social life, which is family, and families are often competitive, but they don't have to be. So you could have people within a family structure where there actually wouldn't be competitive processes involved. So a mother and her daughter, the mom doesn't have to feel like she's competing for the daughter's affection and esteem, and the daughter might not feel like she has to compete for the mom's affection and esteem. They may be in such situations, whether they're only children or not, but they don't have to be. It is not actually a necessity that those are competitive processes, okay? The other three domains of life, romance, friendship, and trade, they have to be competitive processes. There is no choice for them to be competitive processes, okay? And so therefore, it's going to turn out that we are well aware of the targets that we are seeking within those markets. So as a 7-year-old boy, I was very interested in a girl sitting next to me in my second grade class named Kim, who is very cute, okay? But these days, well, by the time I was 10, I wasn't interested in some 7-year-old girl because that's no longer part of my market. And when I was 16 and I was interested in 16-year-old girls, I wasn't interested in 40-year-old women. Okay. In other words, that they aren't part of my competitive market. So in other words, everybody's interested in competing. Somebody that's trying to get a job as manager at Starbucks isn't trying to compete to be CEO of IBM. So those positions are all competitive out there in the world. People are trying to exchange for those things, for being the sweetheart of the 7-year-old or the 16-year-old or the 40-year-old, or get that job or get that award. Everybody's in a competitive scramble in their own particular ecological niches. So it's going to turn out that this was always true. This is part of human nature for this to be the case. And so it's going to turn out that back in the day, back in the Stone Age village, you had to have some competitive anxiety. The competitive anxiety was a motivating force that would tell you, hey, you better hustle a little bit because your equal is on the other side of the village, or on the other village on the other side of the river. They are hustling. They are getting better. Okay. So why do women fix their hair fancy? Because the other women are going to fix their hair fancy. And if you are just as cute as some other woman who is taking the time to fix her hair fancy, and you are not trying to fix your hair fancy, then the guy that you're both interested in, it's more likely to go for her than for you because her hair looks fancier. Such is life. Okay. So that causes you to feel, quote, not enough as you are right now. It gives you a competitive motivation to improve. Okay. Now we all like that feeling of like, well, no, I just like to be done and done with it. I just want to be done with the competitive. I want to be over. I want to have enough money in the bank that I don't have to compete for a job or have to worry about any of that stuff, and just done. Okay, I want to be married and that's it. Have my husband or wife, never look at another possible mate, just be done. Sorry, it's not the nature of life. The nature of life is that we are always competing. Okay, competitions can be serious and imminent and dangerous or dramatic, or they can be very mild and in the background. So for example, in a very happy friendship or happy marriage or happy employer-employee relationship, nobody's thinking about defecting, ending the relationship, because everybody's very happy with the current state of affairs. But that doesn't mean that that current state of affairs doesn't sit in a competitive matrix. It does. Those people, whether they consciously are aware of it or not, are still running cost-benefit analysis on the choices that they're making. A very happy employee working for Google and excited to be there and getting good salary, do they ever think about working for Pinterest? Well, they probably do, because their friend just got a job at Pinterest and got a bunch of stock, and they got more stock than I got at Google, and therefore now I think about that. Okay, so the competitive processes never end. And because the competitive processes never end, you know that you are constantly being scanned and judged. Okay, people may be very happy with those relationships, and so they may not be raising an eyebrow on you and threatening to sever a relationship, but you are aware nevertheless that you're always needing to perform to earn your way into that exchange. Okay, now, so therefore it should be the case that you should be endowed by your genetic nature to have a little sense of, you better hustle a little bit. You better not be resting on your laurels too long. You better be trying to be making sure to figure out how to put your best foot forward. You should have a sense of slight unease about any current situation. It could be very minor, but it's there. So you can imagine that in a given situation, the average human being would have an average amount of competitive anxiety where they would not feel completely, totally secure in any situation. That's reasonable. Okay. So no matter how happy you are in a romance, if you are 100% convinced that that individual is going nowhere, then there's only one way that that's true, and that is that you are way under rewarded. Okay, that you left way too much on the table, i.e., you're bored. Okay, the only way you don't have any anxiety is if you're bored out of your mind, which means your brain is telling you you could get a better deal, right? So you want you so a good situation in human life is to be aware of some modest degree of background radiation, this sort of nature of awareness of a mild competitive stress. Now, you can imagine that there are people that have a hell of a lot more competitive stress than others, even under very similar circumstances. That's genetic. Okay. So that feeling of when am I ever going to be enough? I never feel like I'm enough. Okay. That's coming from partially being generated by a personality that is simply dialed up to be more competitive than some other personality. So that's outside of our ability to change those circumstances. Those are in the system. Now, I will, as a complete answer, and the answer I was originally aiming at, and that is notice, once again, this is the value of being careful to understand the distinction between esteem that comes from competitive success feedback that we get from other people and self-esteem that comes from the internally generated communication between our internal audience and ourself as the internal audience observes our behavior. If we are seeking a greater peace of mind and a greater peace of mind of that, hey, when is it enough and when are we enough and are we enough? My answer to all of that conceptually at this point in my life is I'm damn well enough as long as I've done an excellent job at actualizing my potential. It's like, if that's not good enough for some portion of the market, so be it. Okay. So if I'm not good enough to be a guest on Dr. Phil because I'm not cool enough and I don't have, nice enough things to say, and I don't say things in some funny little pleasant platitude in a way, then fine, I'll live with that. Such is life. Okay. In other words, what I care about is, did I do a good job according to my own standards? Okay. If I watch my little self-esteem mechanism, it will tell me. Okay. And then the fact that that may not be enough to accomplish some esteem goal that I think is reasonable, that I might be able to reach. In other words, I might be able to get esteem from these people, but I might not. And I'm feeling like, am I ever going to be enough? And the answer is, guess what? You're enough for whoever it is that values you sufficiently. So your job is simply to do what you can do, to do a good job at what you do, earn your self-esteem, and then whatever happens in the marketplace happens in the marketplace. Whatever happens, happens. That is not subject to our control. We cannot control how handsome or beautiful anybody thinks we are. We can't control about who would be our friend or who wouldn't and to what extent. We can't control who would hire us and trade with us to do anything for them. We cannot, an inappropriate goal to set for ourselves is to get someplace with respect to societal feedback, to get to CEO, okay, for example, or to get to a bronze medal, or to get to this or to get to that, or to lose, to be, 5'5" and 115 pounds. Those are not legitimate goals. Those are vague objectives that our behavior is integrated towards, but those are not appropriate goals. The appropriate goals are simply the action of the sub goals that would lead to that we are in control of. What are we in control of? We're in control of what it is that we eat and whether we exercise and whether we answer that email, whether we do this right or we do that wrong, etc. We're in control of that. We are not in control of what it adds up to. All we're in control is making the little pieces. We're not in control of what the whole picture looks like. Okay. So the answer to that question, once again, becomes a greater understanding of the importance and foundation of self-esteem, that we are in 100% control of. It's important to understand that we are 100% in control of self-esteem. That control is indirect. You cannot tell yourself, well, I want you to give good messages to feel good about yourself. You cannot do that. The only way that you can get the self-esteem mechanism to fire is to actually take the diligent actions on a sub-goal that you are capable of taking. That's all that you can do. And if you do that diligently, then the self-esteem mechanism will fire, period. End of subject. Can't stop itself. Guess what is not involved in that? There is nothing about that that says that we're ever going to be able to reach any objective out here. Nothing. Okay? There's nothing that says that we're ever going to get there. There's nothing that says that you're going to get to 5'5" and 115 pounds. No way. Okay? All that I know is that your job is to do this piece. If we keep doing those pieces and keep doing those pieces and keep doing diligently, we may find out that we're 5'5" and 132 pounds. Oops, and I'm pissed off at my body morphology, and I wish that I could be, I don't know, somebody looking fancier. Oh well, and I'm frustrated with it. Such is life. But I can tell you that your job is to earn the self-esteem of doing the journey correctly. That's what we can do. And the notion of, hey, what about that feeling that I'm never quite enough? The only way to quell that as best you can is to simply earn the self-esteem that's involved and understand, also possibly conceptually understanding, that achievement of esteem from other people is absolutely not within your control. Sometimes that's a useful thing for people to know conceptually. That is, and other people's feedback, by the way, towards you about what they think of you or not, is not only is it not under your control, it's also not objective. There is no objective arbiter of the truth. Okay, somebody likes your painting and they can't afford to buy it, but they love it. But the rest of the critics don't like it, and so 19 out of 20 thought it was mediocre, but some person thought it was fabulous and loves it. Okay, there you go. Subjectivity of the feedback. The only thing we had control, and it's nice to get it, but the only thing we have control over is the work that we put in. I'll tell you guys a brief story. I had this, ironically, I had exactly this process happen to me giving effectively this lecture. So this was about 7 or 8 years ago. And I had been trying to tell this story for several times at the McDougall Advanced Study Weekends, one after the next. It started with the continuum of evil. I was trying to work on from at that angle. And then I did someone called Esteem Dynamics. And then I did something else, or Stepping Stones to Self-Esteem. A lot of really good lectures. And Stepping Stones to Self-Esteem lecture, they lost all the recordings. I really liked that lecture, and it went over well, but it didn't go over as well as I thought. And so I came back around and did a different version, and I did a different version. And finally, John kept saying, well, you should come up with something new. And I'm like, this is the one message that I want the world to understand. I can let it all go. I can let the pleasure trap go. This is the problem. The problem is the lack of understanding of the critical nature of the self-esteem mechanism. And so I said, I'm going to do it one more time, and I'm going to give it my very best shot. I'm going to really work this out. And I worked it out as best I possibly could do it. And it's a lecture called The Slow Fast Way. And you can get it on my website, and I think AJ's put it up somewhere. I think AJ moderated it when I gave it. I can't remember. So I gave The Slow Fast Way. It was done live, and they lost the recording, and it went flat. And I'm up there, and I'm giving like the most complicated, most important lecture of my career. And I've already tried for 2 years, hard to try to get this right. And I give this thing, and it's flat. Audience is totally flat. It's 300 people there on the last lecture of the McDougall program on Sunday afternoon. And I walked off the stage, and I'm telling you something, people, I felt embarrassed. I felt, I was disappointed. I felt I felt like I wanted to hide. And so I felt the feelings of that I did not get the esteem. I wasn't angry. I was just like, it's just like a failure that I completely expected it to go really well. I'd worked hard on trying to figure out how to do this as best I could do it. And I walked up there and I literally went back to where they were filming to the guys there and hung out with the guys. And a couple of guys said, "Oh, that was good." I mean, "Oh, thanks." Meanwhile, nobody's coming up to me. No, nothing. I'm kind of hiding back there. And after a few minutes, I was thinking the irony of it. I thought, well, here's the irony of it. Here it is. You're getting effectively negative feedback and you just gave your best. What do you really think of it? And I was thinking, as the minutes went by, I'm thinking, I did the best I could. God, what else? What can I do about it? There's nothing I can do about it. And I went out into the foyer where people mingle. And John McDougall came up to me and he's chatting with me. I don't think he heard the lecture. And we're just talking. And I feel better just to get some esteem from John to come over, have a big dog come over and treat you well. That felt good. And a strange thing happened. John Mackey came up, the CEO of Whole Foods. And John Mackey and I had a little incident back at a McDougall Advanced Study Weekend. It was a little tiff that we had. John's always, both John McDougall and John Mackey, these are very smart guys and they argue with each other and they're kind of disagreeable. They're not going to give you positive feedback if they don't think you deserve it. So John Mackey is always, he's always like, yeah, Doug's okay, but I object to this, I object to that. I thought totally fair. That's just who he is. My sister's like that. My sister's an attorney. John Mackey could have been a great attorney. No shame. John Mackey comes up to me with an amazing smile on his face with a notebook in his hand. And he goes, "Doug, that's the best thing you've ever done." I felt like crying. He stuck his hand out and he's shaking my hand. He goes, "That was tremendous." McDougall's like, "What do you mean?" I don't think John even heard the lecture. If he did, it didn't strike him. Something about this lecture hit John Mackey. He got it. And he was like, "No, you forget everything else you've ever done. That's the best thing you've done." And I have to tell you, admittedly, I got the lesson right there that the steam from other people can be so loud in your nervous system, it can drown out, everything else. So my self-esteem mechanism was absolutely telling me I'd done the best I could. I went up on stage, did the best I could. Afterwards, the wind's out of my sails. My self-esteem mechanism is recovering. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever it was. It's like, hey, I'll just live with it. I'll live with the fact that this went flat again. 4 times to the well, and it's flat. This is the worst of the 4. Okay. And yet and Mackey said that, and I'm like, that's it, I'm done. I was so relieved. It's like, God, if one person got what I was trying to do out of that 300, that's enough. It just happened to be John Mackey, which is somebody that wasn't just trying to give me positive feedback. Believe me, that guy, he didn't do it to be nice. And I remember that moment, 8, 9 years later, as a marker in my mind for this concept. Okay. So you don't need, how are you enough? That you start with the idea that you don't have to have the world like what you do, but it sure helps if somebody does. And somebody probably will. You do your best, it will end up being enough internally. Your internal audience, my internal audience was ready to walk away from that challenge knowing I had given my best. I walked off of there and I said, you know what? I'm never going to try to give that lecture again. I gave it my best and it's flat, and that's the way it is. Okay, so notice I'm perseverating on the same concepts years later because I'm still trying to give, trying to get from people the importance of this insight that I think is a central key to our well-being, particularly as we fight something as slippery and problematic as the pleasure trap. Pleasure trap is a devastating problem when it comes to your self-esteem because it encourages you to do things poorly and self-destructive that your internal audience observes. Our defense against it is to be aware that that's what's happening and to seek out that feeling inside and notice it, that quiet feeling of I did well. Okay. All right.
Will this be in your new book, this story and these concepts?
Yeah. Not that story, but the new book is all around these esteem processes and how life works and really where happiness lies and how to make the best moves possible with decision rules, basically rules of thumb to look about how to manage the challenges of life as effectively as possible.
That's such an interesting story because I know John Mackey, and you're right. He's not somebody that's just going to come up to you just to make you feel good. It had to be sincere.
It was. It was, like I said, that's one of my, I have many little greatest hits in my head. I have incredible moments with clients who I helped them and they did great. And there's nothing better in the world than that. But in my greatest hit, my 500 greatest hits in my life, that moment with John Mackey is definitely in there.
Yeah. It's interesting how so many wonderful things happen at McDougall conferences. I have a similar, maybe, but opposite scenario. When I gave my talk from fat vegan to skinny bitch and got a standing ovation, I retired that talk. I've been asked to give it many times for lots of money, and I won't because I don't ever think I'll do it as good. Yeah. So I just won't do it.
That's fascinating. You know what? But hopefully you have peace of mind. You did it as well as you could do it.
Yeah, that's it.
You prepared really hard for that.
Yeah, and it's on the internet, but that's why I won't give it again. That's so interesting. Do you have time for any more? You want to say goodnight?
No, okay. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. This is from Angel. How to convince stubborn non-vegan men they are wrong. I understand the science and the evidence for eating this way. Any recommendations for convincing stubborn men who insist they need animal consumption to thrive? Not what to tell them or what to watch, but more how to make them see the negative evidence to their claims.
The first thing I do is I go back and watch my videos called Getting Along Without Going Along. So it's on my website for free. But the real story is that I would have to pick this apart and sort of talk this person through what their objectives are. So there aren't stubborn men. There's some stubborn man that is specific to you. Okay, so if it's stubborn men in general, then you've got a big problem because you're not going to convince the world or any large amount of the world to do anything. Forget about it. So the question is, there's a specific human being, or maybe a few, probably not more than 3, that would possibly, it might be your dad and your son, and your husband. So how many can there be that are essential, or that it would be very important to you to have them change their behavior because you're concerned about their health? If there's some other objective, then I would pick apart that other objective as being not well considered. So if you're going to try to change stubborn men for the sake of the planet, you're wasting your time. Okay, we're never going to accomplish anything in that way. If it's your doctor and your doctor's snarling at you and saying that no, this is the way it is, that you're wasting your time. We don't need to convince your doctor of anything. So we begin with the issue of that we've got somebody that's important to us, and we want them to understand something that they don't understand. And we've already bombarded them, and what we've gotten back is a bunch of resistance. Okay, so those resistances are going to come from different reasons. So each individual male's brain is resisting for its own specific set of reasons. One of them may actually disagree with you. In other words, they've been exposed to other information that contradicts what you're saying, or it doesn't seem logical to them. So for example, it seems like, well, all of our ancestors always did hunting, and so therefore, why shouldn't we, and blah, blah. So in other words, they may not have any information other than a general pattern and a belief in sort of some natural process, and they think that that would be reasonable. Or they may suspect that you're right, but they don't want to pursue that path, and they're going to not give you the satisfaction. They know that they're not going to do it, but they're willing to put up with whatever health sacrifices associated with it. That they may rate it as very minor, they may rate it as major, but they may rate it as worth it. And so they run a cost benefit analysis on it, and they say, you know what, I'm willing to give up 2 or 3 years of life and a couple of years hobbling around without my feet from diabetes when I'm 81. I'm 58 now. What do I give a damn? This is how I'm going to live. And they don't want to give you the satisfaction of telling you that, basically exposing that they are going to be self-indulgent in this way rather than protective of their health. And so they pretend like they're arguing with you about the facts, but really they're arguing with you about the value of essentially following the pleasure trap. So that's actually a different thing. Okay, so it's the equivalent of wine drinkers that like that wine a little too much, and then they try to sell you on the idea that the wine's full of antioxidants and that it's healthy. And it's like, really? Okay, I'm going to start. If that's the argument that you're having, then we're going to sit down and look at all the information on the brain damage that every glass of wine does, and talk about that. Okay. Oh no, I disagree with you. Okay, well, yeah, if you know that I'm credible and you know that my evidence is credible, what you're really doing is you are defending the self-indulgence by pretending that it's an argument over the facts, but really it's just the fact that this is what you want to do with your life. Now, so understand how complicated this question is. So the question is, what is the nature of the resistance? It depends upon, if it's the third class, they actually suspect that you're right, but they're really not interested in it, then why are we arguing? Okay, this is not our problem, and there's no solution to be had from within this discussion. So that's important to understand. Okay, so that's fair. But it could be the case that they actually would be interested in optimizing their health, but they literally disagree with you about the facts. Okay, well, that's interesting. Now, if these are people close to us that we care about, that we actually love, if that's true, then there's a better way than arguing with them about exposing them to this perspective. Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, an example would be, listen, Bill, okay, your dad, this is, I care about you tremendously, and I want to earn my keep as your daughter. And one of the ways that I can earn my keep is to try to give you, the thing that I think would be the most valuable for you that I could give you. And the most valuable thing that I could give you is to give you knowledge that you may be seeking about what's healthiest for you, and that you happen to have read, Eat Right for Your Type, and you're believing in this and you're actually following it and you think it's right. And actually, I'm convinced that it's not right. And so I'm not arguing with you about this. I actually think you're making a mistake, and it's a little heartbreaking, and I feel a sense of responsibility to try to find out. And so I want you, if you'll do this for me, I want you to expose yourself to some of the people that I have listened to that have convinced me. If you do that and you find no interest in it and you don't think it's credible, then I'm going to just leave it alone. And you're not going to hear from me in the future. I don't rule out that I might not make a snide comment at Thanksgiving now and then, but basically I'm going to leave this alone. Okay. But if you'll do this for me, it's 2 hours. I've spent 1,000 hours trying to understand this stuff. I believe I understand it. I could be wrong. Okay. But your opinion, I don't believe is as informed as mine. Okay, but if you will spend 2 hours of this life, I've got the movie right here. It's called Forks Over Knives. Okay, if you'll watch it, I won't even be around. You can roll your eyes. You can throw popcorn at the screen. If you will watch this and tell me that you watched it, then we're done. Okay, if that piques any interest in what these men's work is, great, and I can show it to you. I've got copies of their books and all that sort of jazz and some other videos. Okay, but if you're like, you know what, not interested, I think these guys are on the wrong track, then no problem. But at least I've done my job, and I got you the best that I could give you, and then I've got peace. Okay, so that's how I would do it. And that would optimize our chances of actually getting them to listen to a professionally done argument rather than us trying to do the argument. Okay. And that's how I think that you would have the best opportunity to make an impact on somebody you care about. If you don't care about them, don't waste the time. Waste the time. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Lyle. That was great. I don't want to respect your time, so we'll catch the next questions. I know that next month you and Frank have switched, so you're going to be the second week, March 9th, and Dr. Sabatino is going to be week 1, and Dr. Sabatino is also going to be there next week this month. So thank you so much, Dr. Lyle. This was great. I encourage everyone to listen to it again tomorrow, and see you next week, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Fantastic, everybody. Thanks for having me, AJ.
Oh, we love having you. Bye, guys.